All right, my dear children of class 11 science, now we move to the next topic under unit number 8, means we are still in the chapter second law of thermodynamics. Okay, now there's a topic that we are going to discuss that is called Carnot's ideal heat engine. So in the last YouTube video you learned in detail about the heat engine, and we express we derive the expression of what? Efficiency of what? Heat engine. And from that expression also we saw that the efficiency of a heat engine is always less than 1 or less than 100%. That means there is no engine has been ever designed whose efficiency is always equals to 1. So even Carnot, as one of the scientists who developed an ideal engine, and ideal means a theoretical consideration, not practical, actual engine. Okay, he developed one ideal engine, and this engine is called ideal heat engine. So Carnot, as I said, developed a plan of an idealist or theoretical heat engine. This is called ideal engine, means also called a theoretical heat engine. Okay, and this engine was developed in such a way so that he even expressed the efficiency of what? Heat engine also, even of this ideal heat engine. So we even deriving the expression of efficiency of heat engine, and with this condition, okay, you will see that the efficiency of this Carnot ideal heat engine will even not be how much percent? 100%. But for his consideration, when he made this theoretical heat engine, okay, he considered the heat engine free from all the what? Imperfection of an actual engine. Imperfection what? Actual engine. This means the engine which he made, okay, he designed, okay, in such a way so that the working part of the engine are free from the friction, even free from the pressure and temperature of the working part are never different appreciably from its surrounding. Okay, and there are other conditions also he taken into consideration. Okay, and these conditions which I told you just now can never be realized in practice, actual practice. That's why this ideal heat engine is also called as reversible engine. This is also known as what engine? Reversible engine. So we can also call this as reversible engine. Reversible what? Engine. Because this reversible ideal engine is simply an ideal conception only a theoretical consideration. Okay. Now, but in actual practice, this consideration is never happens. So under this case, Carnot presented an imaginary picture of this heat engine. Okay, and this imaginary picture of this heat engine, ideal heat engine, basically consists of 4 different components. So how many components are there? 4 different components. So let me just write it down. Carnot's engine. Okay, Carnot engine consists of how much? Consists of 4 components. 4 components. And children, out of 4 components, the first component is a cylinder. So Carnot consider a cylinder with perfectly heat insulating wall. Perfectly heat insulating wall means the wall which is made in such a manner so that the heat will not even pass to the surrounding. That means there is no exchange of heat between the system and the surrounding. Okay, completely insulating, perfectly heat insulating wall, and perfectly conducting base. And the base was taken in such a way so that it was like perfectly conducting base. Means the 100% heat can transfer between the system and surrounding. Okay, with a tight fitting, perfectly insulating and frictionless piston. So what type of piston was considered? A frictionless and perfectly tight insulating piston. Okay, so this is the consideration which was made by Carnot, and this is the first component. This is the what component? First component. Now we have second component that was considered by Carnot. And the second component that he considered is a hot body. Yes, definitely a what body? Hot body, which is also called source of infinitely large heat capacity, also called thermal capacity, at a constant temperature. And that temperature he considered as T1. This is the second component. Third component is a cold body. This cold body is also called sink, of infinitely large heat capacity at constant temperature, and that is also considered as T2. And lastly, a perfectly heat insulating stand. a perfectly what? Heat insulating stand. So these are the 4 different component, okay, that was made into consideration by Carnot to prepare a what is ideal what heat engine. So children, whatever 4 components we have taken into consideration, and that was the consideration made by Carnot, and with that Carnot prepare a picture. Okay, this is basically a picture to consider an ideal heat engine, and this heat engine is also called Carnot ideal heat engine. So in this heat engine also there are 4 different components which I already considered. So one of the first component, as you know, it is a cylinder. So this is a cylinder. So children, this is a what? Cylinder. This is a cylinder with perfectly heat insulating wall. So this is a perfectly heat insulating wall. This is perfectly what? What type of wall? Perfectly heat what? Insulating wall. Insulating what? Wall. That means there is no heat that exchange between system and surrounding. Okay. And perfectly conducting base. So this is a base. This is what? Your base. But what type of base? Perfectly conducting base. Perfectly conducting base. Okay. Now this is usually fitted with a tight fitting. You can see tight fitting, perfectly insulating and frictionless piston. So there is a piston out here. So this is a piston. Okay. So this is usually a what? Piston. But what type of piston is fitted over this cylinder? A perfectly what? Insulating and frictionless piston. And this is a tight fitting piston fitted on the what? Cylinder. But one thing you need to keep in mind is that in this cylinder, okay, there must be a working substance. That means we take working substance as a fixed mass of gas. So this Carnot also consider a fixed mass of gas. So fixed mass of what? Gas as a what substance? Working substance. So there is a fixed mass of gas. So there is a gas inside this cylinder, and this gas is actually nothing but what? A working substance. As what substance? Working substance. So this fixed mass of gas, also called working substance, is filled in the cylinder, and some weight are also placed on the piston. So you can see some weight placed on the piston. Okay, so there are some weight placed on the piston. So these are the weights. This is the what? Weight. So this is the first component of Carnot ideal heat engine. Now we have the second component. As I said, second component is nothing but the hot body. So we take this as a hot body. So this is a hot body. And you know, hot body is also called what? Source. Hot body is also called what? Source. And this source is maintained at a temperature T1. Source is maintained at a temperature T1. Okay, so that this hot body should have infinitely large heat capacity. That's why it is also placed inside. This hot body is also taken on a infinite thermal capacity at constant temperature. That means the temperature of hot body should also be maintained constant. Similarly, there is a cold body. The cold body is also called sink. So we take this component as a cold body. So I am taking this as a cold body. Now cold body, as I said, it is also called sink, and this maintain a very low temperature, a constant temperature, which is T2. Okay, then after we have the last one. That means this cylinder has to be placed on the stand, and this is called perfectly heat insulating stand. So this is your heat insulating stand. Insulating what? Stand. That means this is completely or perfectly a heat insulating stand. And children, the most important part out here is to find the efficiency of this Carnot ideal heat engine. Okay, so the working substance which we have taken is imagined to be through a cycle of 4 different processes. So that means Carnot heat engine, which derive the expression of efficiency, undergoes 4 different processes, and these processes are the cycle of processes, and these are also called Carnot cycle. So what is Carnot cycle? So how many processes can occur in Carnot cycle? 4 different processes. So for that, I'll just brief with the help of diagram. So what are the processes that occurs in Carnot cycle? So this is another part. Let me just add it out. Carnot cycle. So Carnot cycle consists of how many processes? As I said, 4 processes. 4 different processes. Okay. Now for that we draw a diagram. Let me just Draw this diagram. Okay, and this is usually a graph between pressure and volume. Pressure and what? Volume. Because the four processes which undergoes under Carnot cycle are, one is isothermal expansion, another is called adiabatic expansion. Then after we have isothermal compression and adiabatic compression. And you know that when we talk about isothermal and adiabatic processes, okay, whether it's an expansion or compression, basically this can be expressed with the help of graph that is called pressure volume graph. So we draw a graph called pressure volume graph. So I'll just draw the nature of the graph first, then I'll just brief about the cycles. And children, for this Carnot cycle, as I said, how many processes are involved? 4 processes are involved, and these processes can be expressed with the help of graph that is called pressure volume graph. And the graph I have already plotted. So this is a graph which was designed by what? A cycle which is designed by Carnot. Okay, so what are the processes that involved in this Carnot cycle? Means one is isothermal. Let me just highlight. One is called isothermal expansion. And you know, when I use the word isothermal, means the temperature remains constant. Number one. Number two is adiabatic expansion. Adiabatic what? Expansion. Number 3 is called isothermal compression. Isothermal what? Compression. And last one is called adiabatic compression. So these are the 4 different processes that occurs in your Carnot cycle. Okay, and these processes can be understood with the help of this graph. Okay, this particular graph. So in the first process, that is called isothermal expansion. Okay, this can be explained by this part of this curve, that is from AB. This part of this cycle, a curve, represent what? Isothermal expansion. So in this particular expansion called isothermal expansion, so what we basically do in this design, that means the Carnot, how he designed this engine by Carnot itself to understand isothermal what? Expansion. So in that case, Carnot first placed the cylinder, okay, that cylinder, this particular cylinder, on the source, this particular source, maintained at temperature T1. Maintained at temperature what? T1. Then after, the weights, you can see the weights on the what? Piston. The weights of the piston are placed and adjusted such that the piston remains fixed in position. That means piston remains fixed in what? Position. That means this piston was placed, okay, is placed on the source, okay, that is at temperature T1, which supply heat to the cylinder. Okay, at the time what happened? The weight of the piston was placed on the piston in such a way so that the piston remained fixed in what position? When piston remained fixed in position, okay, makes that the state of the working substance, the state of this working substance means this gas is okay represent okay by the point, and that point is A. That point is A in the graph, PB graph. Okay, so this A is the point where the gas as a working substance is initially at this particular stage. Okay, now the piston is then allowed to move out infinitely, slowly. That means very, very slowly, because you know isothermal process occurs very slowly. It's a slow process. So what happened? What he did exactly is that the piston is allowed to move out, okay, infinitely very slowly by simply decreasing the weight from the what? Piston. Okay, in such a way so that the volume of the piston increases by a very little amount, by a very small amount. When the volume of the piston increases, gas which is involved inside the cylinder increases by a very small amount, definitely the pressure decreases by also very small amount. Okay, so that the gas is allowed to undergo an isothermal expansion. The gas is allowed to goes under what? Isothermal expansion till the stage of the gas is represented by point B. That means when the volume of the gas increases from B1 to B2, so that the pressure of the gas decreases from P1 to P2. So that under this isothermal process, the temperature of this source will maintain constant. That's why in isothermal process, temperature must remain constant. And this curve AB represents isothermal expansion. So children, A, B of this graph represent isothermal expansion. Then after isothermal expansion, we have adiabatic expansion. Now in adiabatic expansion, the cylinder, you can see this cylinder is now next placed on the stand, this particular stand. Okay. Now the piston is now again allowed to move infinitely slowly. Again piston is allowed to move infinitely slowly, so that the gas is allowed to undergoes adiabatic expansion till the point moves to C. That means from B to what? C. Because as I said, B to C is called adiabatic expansion. This is adiabatic expansion. So in this graph you can see AB isothermal expansion, BC means adiabatic expansion. But even in adiabatic expansion, what is happening? You can see the volume is changing from B2 to B3. The pressure also changing from P2 to P3. But it's not only the volume and pressure changes, the temperature also changes from T1 to T2. Okay, because in adiabatic expansion, all this parameter changes. So children, under this adiabatic expansion, the gas, okay, as a working substance, okay, have adiabatic expansion till this gas move from B to what? C, so that the temperature of the gas falls to what? From T1 to what? T2. From T1 to what? T2. And this is represented by BC. Then after adiabatic expansion, we have isothermal compression. So we again need to compress the gas. So in order to compress the gas, now the same cylinder is now placed on this cold receiver or cold body, which maintain temperature T2, which is already maintained at temperature what? T2. Okay. Now this sink at temperature T2 and the gas is made to undergo isothermal compression, okay, which is represented by CD. CD represent what? Isothermal compression. Children, this is isothermal compression. Isothermal compression. So in isothermal compression, what is happening? The volume is decreasing from B3 to B4. So the pressure is increasing from P1 to P3 to P4. This is increasing. Pressure increasing, volume decreasing. Okay. So that under this isothermal compression, okay, the volume decreases from B3 to B4, pressure increases from P3 to P4, which is represented by this curve, that is CD. But under this isothermal compression also, the temperature of this cold body was maintained constant, and that temperature is T2. And lastly, we have adiabatic compression. Now adiabatic compression is the final process which occurs under this Carnot cycle. And this is actually represented by D to A. DA represents adiabatic compression. So in adiabatic compression, finally this particular cylinder is placed back on the stand. Placed back on the what? Stand, and the cycle is completely what? The cycle is completely by adiabatic compression till the temperature of the working substance return back to T1. The temperature of working substance return back to what? T1. That means adiabatic compression is occurring when the piston is placed on the stand, and adiabatic compression is also occurring when the piston is this cylinder is placed on the stand. Whereas isothermal expansion and compression occurs when this cylinder are placed at hot body and what body? Cold body. Okay, because in adiabatic compression and expansion, the temperature also changes. That's why in the graph, this particular cycle, DA represent this is adiabatic compression, represent adiabatic what? Compression, where the volume decreases from B4 to B1, and the pressure increases from P4 to P1, so that the temperature even increases from T1 to what? T2, because when there is a compression, the temperature increases from T2 to T1. So this is a cyclic process which was considered by Carnot itself, but this is simply a theoretical consideration, okay, under the consideration of heat engine. So children, I have just brief about the cycle, the Carnot cycle, along with the Carnot ideal heat engine. Now in the next YouTube video, okay, we just try to understand the efficiency of this Carnot ideal heat engine, followed by we learn the last topic from this chapter, that is called Carnot ideal refrigerator. And this Carnot ideal refrigerator is also called heat pump.